The time has come.
Are you certain?
There is no turning back.
The crowd laughed as a rugged cowboy spent his last dollars on a silent Apache girl at a slave auction. Her wrists were covered in chains, her eyes fixed on the ground, and no one could understand why he chose her. But the moment he removed her shackles, she whispered a secret that made his blood run cold. Within hours, powerful men were hunting them both, and the cowboy realized he hadn't just bought a prisoner. He had stepped into a mystery that could change everything. The summer sun burned over the small frontier town of Red Creek. Dust drifted through the streets as ranchers, merchants, and travelers gathered in the town square. It was auction day, and people had come from miles away to buy horses, tools, livestock, and laborers. Standing near the back of the crowd was Ethan Walker, a hard-working cowboy who kept mostly to himself. At 30 years old, Ethan had spent most of his life working ranches across the territory. He owned a small piece of land outside town, a few horses, and little else. Though he was not wealthy, people respected him because he was honest and fair. Ethan had not come to buy anything. He only needed supplies before returning to his ranch. The auction had already been going on for hours when the mood suddenly changed. 2 armed guards climbed onto the wooden platform, leading a young Apache woman in heavy chains. The crowd grew quiet. Ethan looked up. The woman appeared exhausted, but there was something unusual about her. Despite the chains around her wrists and ankles, she stood straight. Her dark eyes remained calm as she looked over the crowd. The auctioneer stepped forward. "Strong and healthy," he announced loudly. "Captured near the southern hills. Who wants to start the bidding?" Several men immediately shouted offers. Some viewed her as cheap labor. Others seemed interested for reasons Ethan did not like. The woman remained silent. As the bidding continued, Ethan noticed a wealthy rancher named Caleb Morton watching closely. Morton was known throughout the region for his cruel temper. Most people avoided crossing him. For a brief moment, the Apache woman looked directly at Morton. Fear flashed across her face. It vanished almost instantly, but Ethan had seen it. Something about that look unsettled him. The bidding climbed higher. Morton continued raising his offers without hesitation. The crowd seemed certain he would win. Ethan told himself it was none of his business. He should walk away. He should return to his ranch and forget what he had seen. Yet the image of fear in the woman's eyes would not leave his mind. Before he could stop himself, he raised his hand. "I bid." The crowd turned. Several people laughed. Morton glanced over with obvious surprise. The auctioneer repeated Ethan's offer. Morton answered with a higher bid. Ethan matched it. Again and again, the numbers rose. Each bid pushed Ethan closer to spending nearly everything he owned. His savings had taken years to build. Still, he continued. The crowd fell silent as the contest narrowed to 2 men. Ethan Walker, Caleb Morton. The tension grew with every offer. Finally Morton narrowed his eyes and stared at Ethan. For several long seconds neither man spoke. Then Morton stepped back. "I am done." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The auctioneer quickly brought down his hammer. "Sold." The sound echoed across the square. Ethan had won. The guards pushed the young woman toward him. She looked at him with confusion but said nothing. Ethan completed the payment and accepted the papers. The transaction left a bitter feeling in his stomach. A person should never be bought or sold. He knew that. Yet it was too late now. Without speaking, he led her away from the square. Many people watched them leave. No one understood why Ethan had spent nearly all his money on a stranger. Truthfully, Ethan was not entirely sure either. The journey to his ranch took more than an hour. The woman remained silent the entire way. As they approached the small cabin, Ethan stopped beside the porch. The evening sky glowed orange above the distant hills. For a moment neither moved. Then Ethan pulled a key from his pocket. The woman stiffened. Slowly he unlocked the chains around her wrists. The iron fell away. Next came the chains on her ankles. They landed in the dirt with a heavy sound. The woman stared at her free hands. She looked almost unable to believe it. Ethan stepped back. "You are free," he said quietly. She lifted her eyes toward him. Free? Yes. You are not keeping me here? Ethan shook his head. I did not bring you here to own you. For several moments she simply stared. Then she spoke in a calm voice. You should not have done this. Ethan frowned. Why? The woman looked toward the distant mountains. A shadow crossed her face. Because now they will come for you too. A chill moved through Ethan. What do you mean? She hesitated before answering. There are people searching for me. Who are they? Her expression grew serious. They believe I know something. Ethan waited. The woman slowly met his gaze. My name is Ayanna. The wind stirred across the ranch. For the first time that day, Ethan realized the trouble he had brought home might be far greater than he imagined. The last light of day disappeared behind the hills as darkness settled over Ethan's ranch. Inside the cabin, a lantern cast a warm glow across the small room. Ethan placed a bowl of stew on the table while Ayanna sat quietly across from him. It was the first proper meal she had eaten in days. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable, but it was filled with questions. Ethan finally leaned back in his chair. You said people are searching for you. Ayanna lowered her spoon. Yes. Who are they? She hesitated. I do not know all their names. You must know something. Ayanna stared at the flickering lantern flame. Months ago, men attacked my village. They were not soldiers. They were looking for something. What were they looking for? I do not know. Ethan sensed she was telling the truth. Then why do they think you know something? Ayanna's expression tightened. Because I escaped. The answer left more questions than it solved. Before Ethan could ask another, a sudden gust of wind rattled the cabin windows. A storm was moving across the plains. Thunder echoed in the distance. The sound reminded Ethan how isolated the ranch truly was. After dinner, he prepared a small bed near the fireplace for Ayanna. You can rest here tonight, he said. She nodded gratefully. For the first time since arriving, some of the fear in her eyes seemed to fade. Perhaps she was finally beginning to believe she was safe. But outside, danger was already drawing closer. Miles away, Caleb Morton sat on the porch of his large ranch house. 3 riders approached through the darkness. Their horses stopped near the gate. The leader dismounted first. He wore a black coat and a wide hat that hid much of his face. Morton stood slowly. You found me. The stranger nodded. You lost the girl. Morton's jaw tightened. Walker paid more. The stranger stepped forward. That does not matter. It matters to me. I am the one who lost money. The man's eyes turned cold. You were never paid to buy her. Morton immediately fell silent. The stranger continued. You were paid to deliver her. A heavy tension settled between them. Morton glanced toward the dark horizon. What makes her so important? The stranger's voice dropped. She knows where it is. Morton's eyes widened slightly. You are certain? Very. And now Walker has her. The stranger looked toward the distant lights of Ethan's ranch. Then we take her back. Back at the cabin, midnight approached. Rain began tapping softly against the roof. Ethan slept lightly in his room. Years of working cattle had trained him to wake at the slightest disturbance. Ayanna, however, was already awake. Something felt wrong. She sat upright and listened. At first she heard only rain. Then another sound reached her. Hoofbeats. Faint but growing louder. Her heart immediately began racing. She moved carefully toward the window. Several dark figures were riding across the plains, coming directly toward the ranch. Ayanna recognized one of them, even from a distance. Caleb Morton. Fear rushed through her. She hurried to Ethan's room and pushed open the door. Ethan. His eyes opened instantly. What is it? They are here. Ethan sat up. Who? The men looking for me. He grabbed his rifle and hurried to the window. The riders were much closer now. Lightning flashed across the sky. For a brief moment, their silhouettes became visible. 5 men, armed, approaching fast. A loud voice suddenly broke through the storm. "Walker!" The shout echoed across the ranch. Ethan recognized Morton immediately. Another voice followed. "Send the girl outside and nobody gets hurt." Ayanna stepped back from the window. Her face had gone pale. Ethan looked at her. "What do they want from you?" She shook her head. "There is no time." Outside, the horses stopped. The men spread out around the cabin. Rain poured harder. Thunder rolled overhead. Then came the sound that made Ethan's blood run cold. The sharp click of a rifle being loaded. The night had only begun, and trouble had finally arrived at his door. Rain hammered the roof as Ethan stood beside the window, gripping his rifle. Outside, the riders had surrounded the cabin. Their horses shifted nervously in the mud while lightning flashed across the dark prairie. Another voice called out from beyond the rain. "Walker, this is your last chance. Hand over the girl." Ethan glanced at Ayanna. She stood near the fireplace, her face tense but determined. "Do you know these men?" he asked. "Some of them," she replied. "And the others?" Ayanna shook her head. "I have never seen them before." The answer worried Ethan even more. Morton was dangerous enough on his own. If strangers had joined him, then something much larger was happening. A gunshot suddenly shattered the night. The bullet tore through one of the cabin walls. Wood splintered across the room. Ayanna flinched. Ethan immediately pulled her away from the window. "They are not here to talk." Another shot followed. Then another. The cabin was no longer safe. Ethan's mind raced. He knew every corner of his property, including an old path that led through a narrow canyon behind the ranch. If they could reach it, they might escape before the riders closed in. "We are leaving," he said. Ayanna nodded. Together they hurried through the back door and into the storm. The rain soaked them instantly. Thunder covered the sound of their footsteps as they ran toward the stable. Inside, Ethan quickly saddled 2 horses. The animals were restless from the noise outside. Ayanna climbed onto one horse while Ethan mounted the other. Just as they prepared to leave, a shout erupted from the front of the ranch. "They are escaping!" The riders had spotted them. A moment later, gunfire echoed across the darkness. Bullets struck the stable walls. Wood exploded into fragments. Ethan urged his horse forward. The animals burst from the stable and raced across the open field. The chase had begun. Behind them, the riders followed. Hoofbeats thundered through the storm. Rain reduced visibility, but Ethan knew the land far better than his pursuers. "Stay close," he shouted. Ayanna pushed her horse faster. For nearly 20 minutes they rode through darkness and heavy rain. The ground became rougher as hills rose around them. Finally, they reached the entrance to the canyon. Tall rock walls towered on both sides. The narrow passage twisted deep into the hills. Ethan slowed his horse. "This way." The canyon offered protection, but it also carried risks. If the riders trapped them inside, there would be nowhere to run. Still, it was their best option. They continued deeper between the cliffs. The sounds of pursuit faded slightly behind them. For the first time since leaving the ranch, Ethan allowed himself a small breath of relief. Then he noticed something. Ayanna had become unusually quiet. She kept looking toward a section of the canyon wall, as if she recognized it. Ethan followed her gaze. "What is it?" She hesitated. Lightning flashed above the cliffs. For a brief moment, strange markings became visible on the stone. Ancient symbols carved into the rock. Ayanna stared at them. Her expression changed instantly. Not fear. Recognition. "Ethan," she said softly. "What?" She pointed toward the carvings. "This is the place." The wind howled through the canyon. Ethan frowned. "What place?" Ayanna looked directly at him. "The reason they have been hunting me." Behind them, distant hoofbeats echoed once again through the storm. The riders were getting closer. And whatever secret Ayanna had been protecting was waiting somewhere within the canyon. The rain had begun to weaken, but the canyon remained dark and cold. Ethan and Ayanna dismounted beside the carved rock wall. The ancient symbol stretched across the stone, worn by time but still visible whenever lightning flashed overhead. Behind them, the distant sound of approaching horses echoed through the canyon. They did not have much time. Ethan looked at Ayanna. "You said this is why they are hunting you." Ayanna nodded. "When my village was attacked, my grandfather told me something before he died." She stepped closer to the carvings. He was one of the guardians of a secret that had been protected for generations. Ethan listened carefully. "A secret about what?" Ayanna ran her fingers across one of the symbols. "There is a hidden chamber somewhere in this canyon." Ethan frowned. "A chamber?" "Yes. My grandfather said important documents were hidden there many years ago." The answer surprised him. He had expected gold or valuables, not documents. Ayanna continued. "Many years ago, powerful men stole land from several Apache communities. The truth was recorded and hidden before the evidence could be destroyed." Ethan slowly understood. If those papers still exist, they could expose what happened. Exactly. The people hunting her were not searching for treasure. They were searching for proof. Proof that could threaten wealthy and powerful men. Suddenly a voice echoed through the canyon. "Found them!" Ethan turned sharply. Several riders appeared at the entrance of the narrow passage. Morton was among them, and standing beside him was the man in the black coat. The stranger's eyes immediately locked onto Ayanna. A cold smile crossed his face. "You have caused a great deal of trouble." Ethan stepped in front of her. The stranger laughed softly. "You do not even know what you are protecting." "Maybe not," Ethan replied, raising his rifle, "but I know enough." The riders began moving closer. Ayanna glanced desperately at the carvings. Then she noticed something hidden within the symbols. One stone looked different from the others. Without warning, she pressed against it. A deep grinding sound filled the canyon. Everyone froze. Part of the rock wall slowly shifted inward. A narrow opening appeared in the stone. The hidden chamber. For a brief moment, silence filled the canyon. Then the stranger shouted angrily, "Get them!" The riders charged forward. Ethan grabbed Ayanna's arm. Together they rushed through the opening just as chaos erupted behind them. The secret chamber had finally been revealed. And now everyone was willing to fight for what lay inside. The narrow passage behind the stone door led into a hidden chamber carved deep within the canyon. Ethan and Ayanna stepped inside just as the entrance began to shake from the sound of approaching riders. Inside, the air was cool and still. Old wooden crates and sealed leather bags lined the walls. Ayanna moved quickly, searching until she found what her grandfather had spoken about. A bundle of weathered papers wrapped in cloth. Ethan watched as she carefully opened it. Maps. Written accounts. Names. Dates. Proof of land taken by force and people who had been silenced. Outside, voices echoed through the canyon. "They are in there." The stranger in the black coat ordered his men forward. Ethan raised his rifle and took position near the entrance. "You need to leave with those papers," he said. Ayanna shook her head. "I am not leaving you." Before he could answer, footsteps filled the tunnel. Ethan fired. The chamber erupted into chaos. Smoke, dust, and shouting filled the narrow space. Ayanna clutched the documents tightly and moved toward a second exit hidden behind the chamber walls, just as Ethan held the line. Minutes later, silence returned. Ethan stood alone at the entrance. Outside, the riders had gone. Ayanna was gone too. Only the wind remained, carrying the truth out of the canyon and into a world that would never be the same again. In the quiet that followed, the canyon seemed to hold its breath. The storm had passed, but the weight of what happened would not fade so easily. Ethan Walker had stepped into a situation far bigger than himself, and Ayanna had carried a truth that powerful men tried to bury. Some stories do not end when the danger is gone. They continue in the choices people make afterward. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on it. Think about the cost of truth, and the courage it takes to stand for someone who cannot stand alone. And now I want to hear from you. Would you have stepped in like Ethan did, or walked away to protect yourself? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe for more emotional and powerful narratives, and share it with someone who believes in courage and justice. Until next time, stay safe and keep believing in the power of doing what is right.